Hello, everybody. Welcome here to our reading of the Purgatorio, Canto 14. I'm Nicolino Applauso, and I'm a assistant professor here at Loyola University, Maryland. I teach also Italian at Applauso Italian Learning Center, and in Baltimore, here in Maryland. And we're joined by...
Hi, I'm Inga Pierson. And I studied at NYU, and then I was a postdoc at Stanford. In the last 5 years, I've been teaching, actually been teaching Dante in high school. And I also do lessons in Italian. And I'm very happy to be part of this podcast on the Purgatorio.
Oh, yes. And it's great, Inga, to take a look at this very rich and engaging canto. One of my favorite of the Purgatorio, I have to say. Inga, why you like this canto in particular?
So I've done, I'm always teaching the Inferno with students, with high school students, and I've done some writing on the Paradiso, and I wanted a new challenge, so I thought, let's look at the Purgatorio. And one of the things I love about the Purgatorio is the way it includes art, and the art and music. That sort of in-between sphere between reality and then the heavenly spheres. We have what brings in between, we have art. Dante seems to suggest. But this canto in particular interested me because it just seemed relevant. And I was thinking about envy and the role of envy in our own world. Theologically, it's an interesting concept that I think modern people aren't quite familiar with, right?
Absolutely.
I think we think of envy as just, wanting what someone else has, right? Being covetous. But envy is a kind of sorrow over another's good. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And I love the dramatic, just practically speaking, I love the dramatic intro of this canto. So,
yeah, it's a remarkable canto. I agree totally with what you were mentioning about the envy not being too much on the spotlight today. This particular canto is dear to me because I'm from, I was raised in Romagna, in the Romagna region, and more specifically in Riolo Terme, between Imola and Faenza. And this is one of the most Romagnolo canto of the entire comedy. Really, there's some interesting link and connection to this land. And the nostalgia of this beautiful past of Romagna, as well as some connection with Toscana. Very good. I agree.
Sorry. I was thinking I also love that part of it, the nostalgia for a time when there were knights and ladies and courtesy and chivalry, right? They're both the characters who's speaking here are lamenting that past.
Oh, yes. There's definitely beautiful passages here. We can... for our viewer and audience, we can definitely read some of the passages. Inga, you were mentioning the theatricality of the canto. I think this is the only canto in the entire poem that he starts with a sort of theatrical opening with the two characters talking. He's not Dante described. He's not the author. Maybe starting with an invective. We have this. Two characters that just talk to each other, and they wonder, who is that person there, the living soul? It's quite remarkable.
And then the other one says, you ask him because you're closer.
That's right.
Maybe we can give our listeners a little bit of a feel of the canto, because many of these, Dante's participating in the epic tradition, right? So we have this canto, most of the cantos begin in medias res. And this one in particular, and it's the sound that draws us in, right? And sound is very important in the terraces of the envious because their eyes are stitched shut. So we're going to sounds.
Oh, yes, yes.
First we hear their voices, right? And then we're going to have the counter examples that we had in the last canto of envy were pronounced ad alta voce, right? They were heard rather than seen.
Oh, yes, exactly.
And in this case, we're going to have the examples of envy themselves that come up at the end of this canto. Aglaurus, I think her name, from Ovid's Metamorphoses, and then another mythological character. And those are once again broadcast as sounds like thunder rather than seen. which we had in the earlier terraces.
Oh, thank you, Inga. Yes, excellent. I think our viewer to have an idea where we are right now in the terrace of the Purgatorio. Do you think maybe it would be a good idea to read together those this opening of the canto?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Benissimo. So this is how the canto starts. We are going to read in Italian, in the original. Then probably we can show the translation. So, prego, Inga, when you're ready, quando sei pronta.
Io sono pronta. Cominci tu, se fai...
Oh, sì, eh? Allora, chi è costui che il nostro monte cerchia prima che morte li abbia dato in volo e apre gli occhi a sua voglia e coverchia?
Non so chi sia, ma so che non è solo. Domandalo tu che più li t'avvicini e dolcemente sì che parli, accolo.
Oh, yes, very, very good. Eh?
We also get a sense of the personalities of these two speakers. So for our English speakers, Guido, the first, we had Nicolino took on the part of Guido del Duca, which we'll discover as we read the canto, right? They're not identified at first.
Oh, yes.
And I read the part of Rinieri da Calboli, and who's a more courteous. He doesn't speak directly. So he says, ask him courteously, gently, welcome him in a way that's welcoming, right?
Yes.
Invite him to speak to us.
Oh, yes, very well said. And we will hear more Guido than Rinieri.
Yeah, so do you want to tell us something about, since you are the Romagnolo, give us some insight into these characters? Or
Oh, sure, yes. I'll be happy to do it. I can show you one of the most, I would say, popular representation. This is from the Bodleian Library at the University of Oxford. We can see them right here. They are represented in a very gentle fashion. Guido del Duca here is just to give you an overview and give our viewers the overview. The Romagna here in this area by Dante's time is really what we call Romagna today, because Emilia maybe includes more Bologna, but the Romagna region, as you can see, politically is very interesting because it's not a unified area like you may see Repubblica di Firenze or other. There's no big families running it. It was always local rulers, like in the good old days, like Dante will say. Guido del Duca is a nobleman from the Romagna region. Now, he lived doing all this nobleman here is around Frederick II, the Emperor Frederick II here. So I would say that the 12th century, the beginning of the 13th. So Guido del Duca was from a noble family, the Onesti family in the Ravenna region. It was also a distant relative of the Frati Camaldolesi, Peter Damiano. So there's some political significance in the area, and we encountered them in this area. And later on, here probably you can see better the city mentioned by Cavallo. There is also Bertinoro. We can probably talk more about this. And Rinieri da Calboli, he is a descendant of the Paolucci, is Guelph. So it's very interesting. As usual, Dante put the Guelph. And he's born in Forlì, and not far from Faenza, Imola. He was a podesta. He had some important positions. And we know that he was also in Parma, Cesena, Ravenna, really in the Romagna region, taking advantage of his friendship with Lizio di Valbona, who was one of the very prominent Bolognese Guelphs in the area. And then there's also Guido da Montefeltro involved in 1217.
I was going to say, didn't he fight in one of the battle where that's famous in the Inferno, because Guido da Montefeltro had that city razed to the ground.
But Inga, you mentioned that you were attracted by this canto for the situation with Andy. There is definitely, in my opinion, a very interesting connection. The way also the character, the penitenti of the Purgatorio are they found themselves. They are in a very strange situation. What do you think? They are, in this area full of pietre, livide, and they are punished, no, with being covered with the eyes,
Yeah, their eyes are stitched shut. So that's in the first line that Nicolino read. He says, "Now who is this guy who can open and close his eyes at will?" Right? He can't see Dante, but he knows that he's living. Right? He can tell from his voice that he's a living character. So the difference here is that somebody who's not among the penitents on this terrace, right, can open and close his eyes. Their eyes are stitched shut with an iron wire. Brutal, and they're wearing haircloth, like sackcloth, like penitents, right? I think the other interesting characteristic that's quite beautiful, that shows us in the way Dante is able to turn sin into something that actually reflects penance or authentic repentance, right? Like he did with the prideful, that they're bent over. The envious they are leaning against one another. So in a way, that in the image we get as readers is that they're propping one another up, right? And envy is the opposite. So envy is a capital sin because it has these daughters, right? According to Thomas Aquinas, the capital sins are the ones with the most daughters, right? They give birth to the most other sins. And envy gives birth to hatred, to gossip, right? Even when you tell something that's true, but that you probably shouldn't share about someone else, and to calumny. So when you're literally defaming someone else. So those three things, I was thinking just how prevalent those are in our world, that it's especially now that we're dealing with such a virtual world, right? The role of speaking ill of others, right? Or of gossiping about others, or the commonness of this, right? That I think I wonder if even people know what calumny means, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm teaching high schoolers, so that's why it's usually a word I have to explain.
Oh yes, and they were looking maybe in the wrong direction. I like
libel, defamation, right? These things are all over the place. And these are the daughters of envy. So in a way, envy is one of those things where you have sorrow, in Thomas Aquinas' language, sorrow over someone else's good, someone else's honors, right? So that turns in, and that becomes hatred, right? So the way that you try to destroy the other in order to prop yourself up. And their penance is that they're propping each other up, right? And they even use each other positively, right? In a way, I mean, use is not the right word there. They rely on one another. Like Rinieri asks, Guido's a stronger personality. He asks Guido to speak to Dante, right? And he does this multiple times. So I thought it's quite...
I found it very interesting. What do you think about Guido, how he speaks? I think he's the one who starts the conversation, then the canto, and then he takes...
right.
There's a good space in the canto.
Well, yeah, go ahead. He's respectful of Dante. He asks Dante for his name and where he comes from, right?
Oh, yes.
And Dante responds in this strange manner. And as you and I know, the commentaries, there's 1,000 years of commentaries on why does Dante respond like this, because he doesn't give his name. He says, basically, I'm a river dweller. I mean, we have to remember the context. He's just been on the terrace of pride, right? So he's learned something about boasting and about the importance of not being famous, right? He gets a good lesson on that score. But I think it's also convenient in terms of the poem because he says, I'm from the Arno, and that gives Guido this opportunity to pronounce his invective against everyone in the valley of the Arno. So I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Well, we have a very long tirade, I would say, from Guido del Duca. The images are very bestial. They connect to animals. So let me go back to this part. I think you can see here brutti porci, fra brutti porci più degni di galle, che d'altro cibo fatti in uman uso, drizza prima il suo povero calle, and then starts maybe a more positive tone. But you can see here the way now Botoli trova poi venendo giuso, so brutti porci. We have sozzi maiali from the Casentino area, cani rabbiosi, these little dogs, there may be, I think, also some satire. Ringhiosi is not very, of course, respectful. As you can see, lupi voraci, the Fiorentini, volpi astute, the Pisani. So we have different animals. I found in the tradition, especially of satire, is quite common, especially the way the city communicate with each other. I can share something interesting here that we have from Pisa, for example. This is how Pisa was describing. This is a sigillo. You see Pisa, the big eagle, the Ghibelline power, putting down the wealth, maybe Florence, the lion. So in terms of animals, I think is quite present in the traditional medieval tradition, but Guido del Duca really uses that against all these cities. So it's very interesting. What do you think, Inga?
Well, yeah, because these things came from the coat of arms, right? So Dante's, it's common in Canto 27 in the Inferno, right? We were talking about Guido da Montefeltro earlier, and the way he refers to the Malatesta is by the dog, right? The mastiff, he calls them the mastiffs. And then the eagle of the da Polenta family is represented by the eagle. So I think, as you said, it's not uncommon for medieval families and regions to be represented by the animal on their coat of arms. And that animal is usually something fierce, because we're talking about basically warring city-states, right? If you're going back to the Middle Ages. But in this case, I think it also has this moral connotation, right? That the descendant, there's very much about the way, because as we go further down the Arno, they get worse, right? There's a sense that they're getting worse. So we're descending into bestiality. And I mean, that's another thing of what envy does too, right? It creates, all sin does. All sin brings us from that angelic potential, right? That godlike, we were made in the image of God, and we were made to resemble God, right? Both in the way God sees the world and in the way God loves. God's love is unconditional, right? So we're invited as people to imitate that and to aspire to that. Whereas sin brings us closer to that other side, the animal side of our being, to that bestiality. So we get the foul hogs, and you pointed out the adjectives, the cani ringhiosi, and then the voracious wolves. After this tirade against the different peoples who inhabit the Arno, right? It's like Dante brings up the Arno. Very convenient.
Yes,
I have a few things to say about that valley. I have a few things to say about the whole course of the river and the people. But then he has this other, he matches that like in a sort of perfect contrast that goes in the opposite direction, whereas an elogio of sorts, right? A eulogy or an homage to the past and to the great people of Romagna, of his own region, right?
Oh yes, there's a beautiful line. I think it's my favorite in the Canto. I think in verse 109. I think this was very influential for many other Italian writers. I think Ariosto, if I'm not wrong, he used it.
Le donne cavaliere.
Questo è molto interessante. We have le donne, i cavalieri, le panne, gli agi, che non vogliono amore e cortesia. Very interesting, like the cani, the maiali, we have the pigs, the famelic, voracious wolves, and now we have this very interesting introduction of amore e cortesia. So very strong contrast here. Laddove I cuori sono fatti sì malvagi. So this is, and we have Bretinoro. For me, it's particularly interesting. I have vivid memories of Bagnacavallo, Castrocaro, Faenza, Imola. I also experienced big division as well from these very cities. Being from my personal experience, I was in a high school in Faenza, then I went to Imola, and then Bologna. Now I remember the division as well as the way people also speak, the Emiliani, Romagnoli, even though they were very close to each other. So like you mentioned,
in the accent or in the...
Oh yeah, there's also a political distinction and pride, and somehow.
So you found more division and perversity than you did courtesy and love.
Yeah, I would say so, but
that's probably typical in most high schools, right? Anywhere in the world.
Oh yes. Well, coming from Faenza, I was a sort of foreigner, you find Tino, go back to the I mean, like 10 minutes away, cars.
Right.
But
because that would be the same as like living. We're both now. You're in Baltimore and I'm in Annapolis, right?
Oh yes, it's something that I remember experiencing, and going back to this canto, I can see how this division of cities, but it's very interesting how Dante at the end gives it a break. Okay, there is some hope. We have some nostalgic, some good standards in the past. And what do you think? This is a very list of Bretinoro. Where are they? Ubi sunt? This is an interesting, I think, passage. And is remember Ugolino de Fantolini. Many of these were involved in making the city a better place back then, trying to break the divisions and
to bring to broker truces and negotiate alliances. Right. Yeah.
This was a great discussion. Inga, if there's any other things you would like to add to our comments to this canto?
I mean, I think we might conclude the way Dante concludes here. He says, Guido at a certain point says, okay, no more, because all of this history, right, is making me want to weep, right? And that's the other point of the Purgatorio is, right, we need to move forward. And even the point is that in a Christian or Judeo-Christian light, or in a Christian light, let's say here in this course of a journey, right, from Inferno to the Paradiso, where we need to keep our eyes on the prize and keep moving forward, right? So forward, it's a good way for us to conclude, right? Forward thinking. Just as Dante and Virgil make their way along the terrace, right? Because they're heading towards the next terrace, which will be wrath. They are shocked by these sounds. So that brings us back to, we were talking about the theatricality, right? So the end of this canto is like thunder and lightning. And the thunder and lightning is the voice of Cain saying that he's going to be marked for all of history, right? And then we get another example of from Ovid's Metamorphoses of Aglauros, who was jealous of her sister and is turned to stone by Hermes.
Yeah.
So, the sound. Jealous siblings that acted wrongly, right?
Looking forward, but sometimes maybe even looking backward as the nostalgia of this place. I don't know, Inga, if you know, this is a song. It's about this modern song, but of course Dante didn't know. It's about Romagna. It's called Romagna Mia. I always make
do you know this song, Nicolino? Because I think that would be nice. It would be almost like Guido del Duca's homage to the great knights and ladies of Romagna. Maybe you could give us a modern homage.
Well, I do have a piano here. It's
perfect.
Well, I don't know if we usually do live music in the podcast, but that may be a first. It's a beautiful song, and the song in question is called Romagna Mia. Romagna in fiore, tu sei la stella, tu sei l'amore. No, a word that Dante uses a lot.
Perfect. Yeah.
And there's a connection. So this is the lyric. But yeah, why not? Maybe I can sing a little piece. Maybe the main theme. Very nice song. Sento la nostalgia di un passato dove la mamma mia ho lasciato. Mamma è importante. Non ti potrò scordare, casetta mia, in questa notte stellata, la mia serenata, canto per te. And this is the main theme. Romagna mia, Romagna in fiore, tu sei la stella, tu sei l'amore. Insomma, continua.
I can imagine the accordion at dinner.
No. Molto, molto bella. And then he concludes, lontan da te non si può star. Quindi...
grazie, Nicolino. Wow.
Oh, I'm glad that you like it. It's a song that brings us to the Romagna that also Dante experienced. Maybe it was more welcoming than Firenze. Quindi is always in the heart of Dante in a way, as his resting place is in Ravenna too.
I like that song when we're talking about this canto, because it really seems in theme, right? It seems in line. We're in the spirit of of Guido del Duca's homage to Romagna. So,
nostalgia. Lontano da te non si può stare. Molto bene. I think we can maybe leave it with that, our audience. It was a great discussion, Inga. I'm really glad we did this.
Yeah, thank you so much for making me a part of it. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, excellent. So, arrivederci a tutti. Grazie.
Arrivederci.
Molto bene. Ciao. Bye
Ciao.
bye, everybody.